Okay, so before we get into the conversation, just a little bit about McKinney HR for those of you that don't know us. So this slide has a quick overview of what we do, so you know who we are and where we are if you need us at any time. Our mission is to create environments where people and teams thrive, and our services are split between improve or resolve for our conflict services. We take time to tailor our services to our clients and have a team of associates with specialist experience across a range of sectors. So our contact email is on the slide if you would like to contact us after the webinar. So Dr. Rebecca, we're delighted to have you with us today, so we can learn from your insights and experience. And we've popped up a little summary on the screen there, but there's so much that we could have put on there, but just to highlight your 25 years experience as a GP, looking after physical and mental health impacts of stress. So that's obviously what we're talking about today. But you're so passionate about it that you've started your own company, which is Williams Stress Management, and that was back in 2018. You're committed to educating and equipping people to look after themselves, so much so that you've already published a book. So that's Dealing with Stress, the Mind, Body, Spirit Way. And your services include webinars like this, but also one-to-one virtual conversations and workshops. So we're delighted to have you here. But just before we get started, so there's a lot reported about stress and it's talked about all the time. So by way of an introduction to the topic today, we've put up on the screen just a few bullet points. So it is a natural human response, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And that's how the World Health Organization describes it. So it's a natural human response, and small amounts can help. So for focus and performance. But it's when it becomes chronic and overwhelming that it can lead to mental health conditions like anxiety and depression. But it can also impact on the physical side as well. It's individual. We all feel stressed differently and we all have different coping styles. And it's very much connected with the environment that we're in as well. This webinar is looking at it and thinking about it from the workplace, but that doesn't mean it's always work related. So, you know, you can have personal stress that then still impacts on the work that you're actually doing. Obviously, we need to put some statistics up to focus us, but they're quite scary. When you look at these number of days, you know, thinking about the amount of days that are lost due to stress. So these are from the HSE back in 2023-24, just coming out of the pandemic. And it is a big number there. But also the average length of time that's up on the screen. So 21.1 days for a person to take off relating to stress, depression, or anxiety. So that's really significant. We also need to think about the wider impact of things like presenteeism, reduced productivity, and associated physical complaints as well. So those are the core statistics, but it's a big, wider topic to think about as well. So we've had the benefit of a couple of conversations already with Dr. Rebecca, which has been fantastic. And we could have talked all day, I think. But this is what we thought would be useful to cover for our audience today. So we've popped that up on the screen. And it's thinking about, well, what really happened? So we've got GP experience here to talk through that as well. And that individual aspect as well. So, you know, what are good coping mechanisms and ways that you can address it from that individual perspective? And then thinking about our audience as well, if you're a manager or if you have a team or if you work in HR, as well as thinking about the individual aspect as well, is going to be really important. Practical tools, that's what we all want, really, at the end of the day. What can you use to reduce the impact of stress on yourself, your team, and your workplace culture? So let's start the conversation then. I'll just pop the slides off just now. Hi, Rebecca. How are you doing?
Hi, Rona. Hi. Lovely to see you. Thank you for asking me here today.
Well, thanks for joining us. And I guess, yeah, we've talked about the wider topic, but starting with what stress actually does to our body is probably a really good starting point. So when we actually start to experience stress, what actually happens in our body and our brain as well?
Yeah, no, that is a really fundamental point that we need to talk about because it underpins everything to do with stress. So ultimately, it's all about our fight, fight, flight response, or the acute stress response. Now, this is an evolutionary adaptation to life-threatening situations, which is all about maximizing our chances of survival. So when we're in danger, it's the most primitive part of our brain that recognizes the threat and generates the response. It activates the systems that we need. For example, our heart rate goes up, our breathing rate goes up, our muscle tone increases, making us strong, and our senses become more alert. And it suppresses the systems that we don't need in that moment, so they don't drain resources. And that includes the gut. But very importantly, that also includes the front part of our brain known as the prefrontal cortex. And this is where we do our higher functioning. This is where we think clearly, do our rational thinking. It's where we take in, process, and remember information. We make decisions, we solve problems, and we control our emotions. So once the danger has passed, or we fought it off, or we run away, everything goes back to normal. And that is as it should be. And unfortunately, the brain, smart though it is, can't tell the difference between a life-threatening situation and any other stress that we might be experiencing. So it generates this response to a greater or lesser degree. And that's where we have a problem, because if someone is struggling with stress over days, weeks, and months, their physiology is not as it should be. This affects their mental health. We can often get a lot more anxious and negative thinking patterns, catastrophizing, loss of confidence. We also get the impact on physical health. And that's something I was astounded by in general practice, the number of patients I saw with physical health issues that actually stemmed from stress when we explored it. And it includes things like different kinds of headaches, migraines, tension headaches. Pain here is quite common. People think they've got earache. Actually, it's pain in their jaw caused by clenching of their teeth, which they didn't realize they were doing. A lot of muscular aches and pains. People can get reflux. People can get various chest symptoms like breathlessness, palpitations, and things like that. Abdominal pain, especially irritable bowel syndrome, can flare up, skin conditions, recurrent infections. I mean, the list goes on and on. So, it's important to state, of course, that a lot of these symptoms can have other causes and might need investigation to exclude serious ones. But once people recognize their stress symptoms, it becomes a really useful marker to recognize that they need to pick up and take notice, sit up and take notice and make changes. So, yes, the impact of stress on our body and our mind all comes down to the impact of the stress response, the fight, fight, flight response over a long period of time.
Yeah, and you mentioned a long list of potential ways that it can come out. So you mentioned there about starting to recognize your own stress response. So there might be some of those that, over time you recognize a pattern of these symptoms coming through then.
Yes, absolutely. And that's really important, I think. I had one client who recognized that tension in his left calf was his marker symptom. And
Wow.
when he started to feel that, he knew he had to sit down and actually look at how he was living his life and make changes.
Yeah. Excellent. So obviously we're talking about the brain impact, and we all need our brains to think clearly, and that's an obvious impact on a business. But can you talk us through some other examples of how someone's stress response, the fight for flight response, can impact in the workplace?
Yeah, this is really important. First of all, I'm going to give you a new phrase that I've come up with. I think we all know about presenteeism when someone's ill and working. We all know about absenteeism, and we know about people leaving jobs, and stress can affect all of these. But stress can also have an impact before someone gets ill. So, and I've called this pre-presenteeism. So someone who is struggling, stuff's going on, they're not sleeping, they're not concentrating, as I've just said, their high functioning is not working properly. They will struggle to concentrate to be efficient and productive. They may make mistakes. They may forget things because, as I said, their ability to remember things is reduced. They might forget meetings and let people down without meaning to. Their workload will start to build up. They may lose confidence and start trying to seek reassurance from other people. So clearly that all impacts on the workload of colleagues. And also they may become really irritable. Remember, when our higher functioning is not working, we don't control our emotions as well. So they may become snappy and short-tempered, which again affects the individual, colleagues and even clients, and it might impact on their relationship with clients. So that's really significant. And then, of course, they may develop health problems. And then they fall into the category of presenteeism, which causes problems because that further impacts their ability to function in the workplace. And then they may end up taking time off work, which it puts much more pressure on colleagues and also on employers and managers. They may need to bring someone in to cover for them. And then ultimately they may leave the job, which then can cause obviously a gap in the work in the team. So even more pressure on colleagues. There's the costs and time of recruitment and training for a new member of staff. And if someone, as can happen when they're stressed, makes a really big mistake, that can affect the reputation of the business. So the impact of one person's stress can be absolutely enormous.
Yeah, and so it's so important to recognize that. So we have our own responsibility for our own health, but also looking out for each other as well.
Yeah.
And we talk about manager obligations, responsibilities, and there's obviously HR, it's always on our radar as well. But really it's for each of us as colleagues, isn't it, to be looking out for each other, to see if there's some of those stress, symptoms showing. And it might not be stress, as you say, but being curious about it would be important.
Yeah, and I think, but by its very nature, very often when people are stressed, they don't really realize how bad it is until it reaches a crisis point. So actually, it's even more important that we keep an eye on each other. And the kind of things you might notice, well, you might notice someone looking and sounding stressed, but you might notice that their work's not up to scratch, that you're having to cover for them, make sort of mop up mistakes. You might notice that they have lost confidence and they keep coming to you as a manager or a colleague to check things. And you might notice that they're working all hours, that they're sending emails in the evening and on weekends, which suggests they're not keeping on top of things. Then you might notice a change in their appearance. Someone might have lost weight, put on weight. They may be looking just not as well kept as they normally do, maybe not attending to their appearance, their makeup, their hair. Men may start developing stubble when they don't normally, just because they can't be bothered to shave. So that's really important. And then their demeanor might change. They may become more irritable and kind of fidgety and obviously stressed, but there may be more subtle signs like just withdrawing a little bit socially, maybe not engaging in banter and conversations, not coming to the coffee room or the social events that are being organized. So, and then you might notice signs of unhealthy ways of coping with stress. You might notice alcohol on someone's breath or find a bottle in a drawer when you're looking for something. Or you might notice someone started smoking again or consuming lots of chocolate and crisps and not looking for having healthy food. So there's lots of little kind of subtle signs that you might start to notice that might just raise alarm bells.
Yeah, and it's being confident to gently ask how somebody
Mm.
is, that is okay. And I think sometimes some people hold back from doing that, from prying, because it
Yeah.
feels like such a personal, individual matter. But I think, yeah, that intervention can often be the way, as you say, if it's sneaking up on them and they're not realizing, having somebody actually ask the question, are you okay? Is
Yeah.
there anything else that, any support that you need or any help? How are things in general? And they might open up, and that might be that alert for them as an individual.
Yes, and I think, yes, you're quite right. People are often afraid to ask the question, or they ask the question but give the vibe that they're not really interested in the response because they haven't got time. So, how are you? Are you okay? And someone says, yeah, I'm fine. And then that's it. But actually, the trick is if you have a gut feeling that things are not right, then it's to follow that up and just say, are you really? I've got, why don't we go and have a wee chat? I've got 10 minutes, let's go and have a chat. Or I've noticed what's going on? So don't be afraid to ask the question. A closed or an open question. Actually, in general practice, we're always taught to ask open questions. So a question that doesn't give a yes, no answer. So, but I think in these situations, I think actually, are you okay is also all right if that's more comfortable for you, as long as you follow up with another question. If they just go, yeah, I'm fine. Um, but yes, that sometimes starting these conversations can save people's lives.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as British, we're always talking about cups of tea and how much we love having cups of tea, but that can be so valuable, that 10
Mhm.
minutes, as you said, let's go and
Absolutely.
have a cuppa. You mentioned some unhealthy ways of coping there. So the smoking, alcohol, working longer hours, emails at the weekends is a definite trigger. What can people do instead of relying on those unhealthy ways of coping?
Yes, those are the common ones, as are caffeine and overeating. Right. Well, two tools that I kind of give my clients. So first of all is ask the question why. Why am I reaching for another glass of wine? Why am I reaching for more coffee? Why am I working all hours? Am I bored? Am I anxious? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Because a lot of these emotions we use unhealthy ways of coping, and then try and focus on getting advice on how to manage these things. So if it is anxiety, then look into how you can manage anxiety in a healthy way. There's some blogs on my website that can get you started. Again, if you're not sleeping well, again, look for advice on how to sleep. And again, there's one on my website about that too. If you're lonely, how can you reach out to people you know, or maybe look for ways to try and meet new people? And again, that's something I sometimes end up discussing with my clients who recognize that loneliness is a big factor. And sometimes it's relationship issues. People are lonely within a relationship and just feel stuck, and actually talking to someone about how they can try and improve their relationship. So yeah, ask the question why and try and tackle that head on, and don't just avoid it by relying on an unhealthy way of dealing with it. And then the second option you have is what I call simple joys. So these are the little things that you enjoy as an individual that don't take too long, just a few minutes, and which don't cause you harm. So examples might include watering your pot plants, sitting outside in the sun with a drink, a healthy snack, maybe some nuts or some fruit or something like that. Even reading a page of a favorite magazine or your favorite book, playing a musical instrument. And that's something I would encourage you to reflect on. What are my simple joys? And when you're tempted to reach for something unhealthy, maybe just reach for one of your simple joys, and it will give you a release of positive chemicals in your body and brain and make you feel better without the secondary harm that the unhealthy things can cause.
Yeah, and it's recognizing it then early, isn't it? So,
Mm.
before it gets too far down the line. So having time to pause and reflect every now and again,
Yeah.
instead of just rushing through life constantly. Yeah.
Yes, on automatic pilot. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talk about tools, and can you share some simple tools that employees can use to feel more in control of their stress levels?
Yeah, well, one I always used to talk to my patients about and always talk to my clients about and use myself regularly, in fact, pretty much every day, is the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The acronym CIA says the same thing: control, influence, accept. A lot of the things we stress about are things beyond our control. Like maybe something in our relationship we're really peed off about our partner, but we can't change them. Maybe things going on in the world where we're exposed to so much pain and heartache and destruction, but we can't do anything about it. So, what I recommend is you write down a list of all the things that are feeling stressful for you, and then circle the ones that are actually under your control or influence and where you can do something. So, for instance, if your relationship is you're feeling a bit disconnected from your partner, then that's something you can do. You can actually sit down with your partner and say, right, we need to ring fence some time to spend together. If things are getting worse, then maybe think about counseling. If it's work and you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe talk to your manager. If the things going on in the world are really upsetting you and dragging you down, then don't keep watching the news. People get addicted to checking the BBC website or Sky website, watching the news. People have notifications coming up as breaking news. Just cut that out. Maybe allow yourself to listen to the headlines once a day and then don't watch them. If what's going on in certain countries is upsetting you, maybe you can make a donation to a charity. If you have a faith, you can pray for them, but focus on what you can do and don't keep dwelling on the things that you can't do anything about. Another really important tool is the idea of grounding tools. So When we feel overwhelmed, that's when we're in the grips of our fight, fright, flight response. And that is when we're in a place where we just can't think clearly, we can't make decisions, and we just feel in this horrible place where we can't get out of it. Grounding tools are designed to bring you back into that higher functioning part of your brain where you can actually just feel more objective and in control. So a really important one is breathing. I'm not going to go through the different techniques, but I will give the names of them to you. So diaphragmatic breathing is really important. When we're stressed, we tend to breathe from our upper chest, we breathe fast and we breathe shallow. And that's telling our brain that we're still in a very stressful situation. So it just perpetuates the stress response. So if you can learn diaphragmatic breathing, that's about breathing to the bottom of your lungs. It pushes your diaphragm down, which makes your tummy stick out. So it's the kind of yoga breathing, and it's the breathing that singers do to increase their lung capacity. The best way to learn it is lying on your back with your hand just below your rib cage, and you're looking for your hand to rise up and down. If you just Google that or YouTube it, you'll find demonstrations. So yes, being confident about diaphragmatic breathing. So if you're suddenly feeling your heart's racing and you're feeling overwhelmed, you can just do a few calm diaphragmatic breaths. Alternate nostril breathing is another one. And also just thinking 6-8 is helpful. Just breathe in for 6, out for 8, because that's a longer out breath. And then there's box breathing, where you breathe in, say for 3, hold for 3, out for 3, hold for 3. Or in fact, you could breathe out for 4 and hold for 4. So it doesn't really matter. But what it's doing is it's just calming your breathing down. And the other really lovely grounding tool is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mindful tool. And this is where you just say to yourself out loud, if there's no one there, or in your head, 5 things I can see. And then you focus on 5 things and say them: curtain, picture, chair, glass, computer. Then you say 4 things I can touch or feel. And then you can just reach around and touch things, or you could say, I can feel my hair touching my shoulder, I can feel my feet on the floor. 3 things I can hear. And if you can't hear 3 things, then make some sounds. 2 things I can smell, and that might involve going to the kitchen and smelling some, or the bathroom for soap and kitchen for some spices. And 1 thing I can taste. To be honest, you often don't need to get as far as the smelling and the tasting, because often the process that you've started with what you can see starts to engage the rational brain. And just always be very aware of your senses. They can be very soothing. So if you're sensitive to smell, maybe have a nice scent on your sleeve, or some lavender oil or something that you can just sniff. Or if you find touch is a very comforting sense for you, maybe have something in your pocket that's soft, or whatever it is you like to touch. So you can just surreptitiously put your hand in your pocket and feel it, and feel calmer. So those are really useful. And then when it comes to managing anxious thoughts, there's a great quote I came across, which I love and use all the time. You can't stop the birds flying overhead, but you can decide which ones make a nest in your hair. And what it's basically saying is thoughts come and go. We can't stop them or prevent them, or help them. That's the human condition. But we do have the power to decide which ones we ruminate over, engage with, and dwell upon. And these are the thoughts that will then affect how we feel, how we think, and how we behave. So we need to make a real effort to latch on to the positive thoughts, the kind thoughts, the thoughts of hope. They are the ones that will give us positive attitude to life and help us move forward in a healthy way. And we need to be really strict about the ones that are negative or anxious thoughts, because these ones will not be helpful. So that's where there's different. I think it's important not just to banish them, but to acknowledge them, but then to say, you know what, I'm not going to stick with these. So have a kind of catchphrase, let it go, not now, I'm okay. Something that's just calmly saying, not interested in that thought, thank you. Then some kind of distraction or a mindful exercise can be helpful. And then we have the challenging of our thoughts, which is CBT is the technical term, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's the idea that how we think affects how we feel and how we behave. So we have to target our thinking. And the NHS website has a lovely concept of catch, check, change. So if you have a thought, catch it, check it. Is this a helpful, constructive thought, or is this one that's just making me feel anxious and down and not being helpful at all? If it's the negative, then you need to change it. And this is kind of reframing, I suppose. It's trying to look at things in a different way. For instance, if someone, you say hi to somebody and they ghost you, they just ignore you, you might be thinking, oh my goodness, why don't they like me anymore? What have I done wrong? And you think, hang on a minute, maybe there's another way of looking at this situation. Maybe they didn't notice me. Maybe they're really caught up in something in their own mind that they just didn't see me. Maybe they've got stuff going on and they didn't want to make polite conversation, so it was easier just to walk past. Our thoughts can then go to the other person rather than internalizing our own lack of confidence. So those are a few tools to help you. And again, there are blogs on my website with reinforcing those tools and with some other ones to help you.
That's fantastic. Obviously, there's so much in there, and I think it's really important for people to go and try out what works for them, because you've given such a good range there. So for some person that the scent will be the strongest, but for others, the breathing options might
Yes.
be better. And for some people, combining, so the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then following it up with the breathing. So connecting it back to, you mentioned the fight and flight response, it's trying to pull you out of that, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what grounding is all about. It's taking you back into that rational part of your brain. And once you're there, then your whole perspective on everything changes and you can respond calmly. So, say, for instance, you've read an email and it's making you fume, or you're really upset and really hurt by it. That will set off your fight, fight, flight response. The worst thing you can possibly do is respond immediately, because you'll be responding from that place. And that will probably trigger a response from the other person. And what you need to do is get up, walk away from the screen, employ the grounding tool that works for you. And when you're calm and rational, come back to the email and look at it objectively. And remember that if someone writes an unkind email, that probably says more about them than you. That probably suggests that they're in their stress response and they're reacting to a feeling and an emotion. So the best thing you can do is respond firmly but kindly, and then hopefully that will just calm things and stop them escalating. So the stress response can cause all sorts of harm when people respond from that place and don't take the time just to pause, ground themselves, and then respond.
Yeah, and we talk about assumptions a lot. It comes up in many of our topics that we do webinars. So being curious and then testing assumptions. So that's what you're talking about with the other person, what is going on with them, and not internalizing it. So that's great advice.
Yeah, no, I think curious is my in word this year, actually. I think it's a brilliant word.
It
It
certainly
is.
is.
It's just taking us out of ourselves and wanting to know more. And as you say, not making assumptions, being curious. If we just assuming someone's okay when they might not be, well, let's just ask and find out a bit more about the other person, and just have that time and vibe of curiosity. Then I think people appreciate that. It says that you value them, and that is always to be something you appreciate, that they appreciate.
Yeah, so maybe a pause and reflect for 2 minutes is a good
Mm,
tool in itself,
mm.
isn't it? Yeah. Oh,
Absolutely. And actually, it's something that comes up when people are doing public speaking and they get really anxious and nervous. And I talk about tools to help them and obviously cover a lot of what we've just talked about. But having a glass of water or a bottle of water, if you're feeling really stressed and feeling your heart race, you can just say, "Excuse me, I'm just going to have a sip of water." And that naturally gives you an opportunity to focus on the water. So as you pick it up, you feel it, you look at it, you feel the water touch your lips. That's you being mindful. And through that process of being mindful, it'll restore your calm. Likewise, have a hanky in your pocket. And even if you don't need to blow your nose, you could just say, "Excuse me, I just need to blow my nose." And that's a very natural break that
that's
allows you
great.
just to calm yourself again.
Yeah, I might use that one in future, actually. I like that. Okay, so we've talked about trying to catch things early, which is really key. So if somebody is already struggling but not yet unwell, what are some practical steps to help get them back on track?
Yeah, so this is effectively kind of in the workplace context, it's kind of the pre-presenteeism place, is it pre-presenteeism place. So we look at it from the individual point of view. Um, using tools like the Serenity Prayer is important, and managing anxious thoughts, and fundamentally, and also looking at the way that they're coping with their stress. So that's important. Also, the acronym STAN, I think, can be helpful. It's very helpful when people are struggling. The S has two meanings. Number one is self-care. Self-care is of paramount importance when people are struggling. And unfortunately, it's often what gets put to the bottom of the list because everything else seems more important. But self-care is the most important thing when you're struggling. So that means your sleep hygiene, looking at trying to improve your sleep, in prioritizing sleep. It's about how you eat, regularly eating, avoiding heavy meals late at night, so good hydration, avoiding snacking on rubbery, sugary, and fatty foods. It's about getting exercise. Remember, stress is preparing us for something physical. The whole stress response is about us fighting or running. So actually going and doing something physical can just help to alleviate some of those physical sensations of stress.
Mm.
Getting time for relaxing and downtime to, yeah, just to do things that you want to do, which create positive chemicals in your brain and body, which are positive for your health and well-being. So self-care is really important. S is also for spending time with people who make you feel good about yourself. So if you are struggling, the last thing you need is to spend time with people who drain you with all their own problems, who criticize you, judge you, who make demands on you. So be selective about who you spend your time with. And it's not selfish, actually. It's actually just prioritizing yourself. So if you've got a friend who always comes to you for support, you might just have to say, I'm really sorry, I can't be that for you at the moment because I've got my own stuff I'm dealing with. Please, can you just find someone else to offload onto? So just have the courage to be a bit firm about that in a kind way. T is talk to somebody, talk to a friend, a colleague, a partner, your manager, have the courage to talk and say what's going on. And actually, the process of talking and articulating what's going on can be incredibly therapeutic. A is ask for help. It's a sign of strength to recognize you're struggling and to ask for help. And if you know what help you need, ask for that. If you're a mother with young children and you've just got no space, ask a friend to babysit the kids, or ask a family member if they can just take the kids to give you an hour or two just to spend time on your own to recharge. So try and think about what you need and who you can ask for that help. And N is no. This is the having the courage to say no, and boundary setting, which I think we're going to come on to a little bit later about the debrief session, but it's about having the confidence to say no to something that isn't appropriate, or where someone's making demands of you which are actually unfair or unnecessary. And for yourself, having the courage to say no, right, I'm finishing work now, or I'm going to turn the television off now and I'm going to go to bed. So it's just trying to be a bit firmer about your boundaries and what you need to do. So STAN, I think, is a useful acronym to remember when you're struggling. And then we've got to think about what can the workplace do to support you. So say you've gone to your manager and you've told them that you're struggling. What can they do? Well, first of all, it's really important to take the time to find out what the struggle is. Has someone got a health problem that they need to get to appointments? Have they got a family member and they need to be more at home? Can we be flexible? Can we offer them home working? Can we offer them to come in later, go home early, etc.? Do they need training? Is it something at work that they're feeling unskilled and it's really getting to them and they're feeling really rubbish and scared they're going to lose their job? Can we just arrange some training for them to give them confidence? Maybe some shadowing to give them confidence? Can we reduce the workload? Often when people get into this cycle, their workload's built up and they feel so overwhelmed, which affects their ability to do it. So can we find a way to reduce that workload for a short period of time? And certainly in my general practice work, I had people who came to me who I was wanting to sign off, and they were saying, please don't sign me off. I've talked to my manager, they've been amazing, and they've done this, this, and this, and I'd much prefer to work because I think I'd struggle just being at home, but they're aware of what's happening for me. That to me was the best possible way of managing a member of staff. Conversely, I had people who said, I've been sent home and I've been told I'm not allowed to come back till I'm better. And that was
Wow.
it. And then people who had phone calls weekly from their manager saying, my manager's amazing, they're checking up on me every week and how I'm doing. Others who would say, my manager's phoning every week to see when I'm coming back to work. Now, I don't know how much of that was literal or how much of was their perception because they didn't have a good relationship with their manager. So the manager-employee relationship is so important. If there's trust there and not judgment, then you're far likely to get a better outcome. And then I think of being able to offer one-to-one support, I think is actually really important. And that is something I provide for smaller companies that don't have big EAPs. They phone me up and they say, Rebecca, can you reach out to this member of staff? We've had a chat with them. They're happy to talk to you. We'll pay for X number of sessions. And from then on, our sessions are completely confidential. I'm nothing to do with the business. And I would only report anything back that my client was happy to be passed back. And I would say that all my clients, bar none, that I've done that for have needed between just 3 and 5 sessions to get back to work, and I've never needed to see them again. So often just breaking that cycle, teaching them about all the stuff I'm talking to you about today, helping them be more educated, more empowered, and more equipped, then sends them forward in a much healthier way. So those are some ways to try and avoid the awful situation when people are either not working well or they're off work. And I must just add, again, in my experience, most people don't want to be signed off work. And especially if they've got mental health problems, they feel guilty. They feel they can't go outside because people will think, well, why are you not at work if you can go for a walk? They also feel isolated. They feel they don't belong anymore. They're missing out on all the social and human connection that the work gave them. They're missing out on that sense of purpose. So, especially if someone's got mental health problems caused by stress, actually being off work can be the worst thing possible, especially if they're not getting support and they're alone with their anxious thoughts, which tend to just spiral downwards. So, yeah, finding ways to try and keep people in the loop and a part of work for as long as possible is usually the best way possible.
There's so much in that, and I'm just thinking, we could do a separate webinar on absence management because, yeah, dealing
Mhm.
with someone who is experiencing stress, it's so individual, isn't it? So
It is. And you're
applying
absolutely right.
standard absence management approach is not going to work. It needs to be individual.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I really do want to talk about boundaries. So there was a couple of things you mentioned there, and self-care being huge. I think
Mhm.
sometimes we don't give ourselves permission for self-care,
Mhm.
and that almost links into the boundaries as well, being
Yeah.
confident and knowing that it's okay to be a bit firm with boundaries, but that's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
So talking about, you mentioned daily debrief, and that's a specific activity that you recommend. So could you explain the idea of a daily debrief at the end of the day and how it helps people switch off?
Yes, because as you say, self-care often isn't a priority because people feel guilty putting themselves first or making time for these things. But if we think, I just want to quickly allude to the idea of a kettle. If the water is already hot and then you want a cup of tea, you press the button and very quickly it boils and you have your cup of tea. If you're starting with a kettle of cold water, it takes a long time to come to the boil and then to boil. Now, the grounding tools are useful when you're up here, are useful at bringing you back from the boiling point back to just below boiling point. But they don't really help with all of this, the heat that has led you to that point of being almost ready to boil over. That is where self-care is fundamental. Self-care, looking after ourselves day by day, prioritizing sleep, downtime, exercise, healthy eating, hydration, regular breaks. These are the things that make us more resilient and better able to cope with the challenges. So these are the things that keep our temperature low and make us less likely then to fall into that boiling point or to reach the boiling point. So from that point of view, yes, self-care is really important. And on that subject, this is where I brought my debrief idea to my clients, because a lot of people, especially if they're working from home, really struggle with the setting of the boundary at the end of their working day. If people are going into an office, they leave home. On the way into work, they start thinking about what's planned for the day ahead. At the end of the day, they wind down, they think about how it's gone, they start thinking about home and what they're going to do when they get home in the evening. When you're working from home, either in on the dining room table or even in your study, it's far too easy to drift in and out between your personal life and your working life. And it's far too easy to start thinking about work and to let it take over. So I found a lot of people struggle with that. So the idea of the daily debrief is to try and help you create a clearer boundary between the end of your working day and then your evening when you can do what you want. So first of all, you decide roughly what time you want to finish your working day. So say you decide, well, I want 5 o'clock to be my official finish, and add on an extra half hour as your debrief time. Now, the first thing you do in this, so at this point, your notifications should all be off. You should be undisturbable. And the first thing you say is, right, well, what's gone well with my day? And reflect on what's gone well, because often we don't. We're just hurtling through the day without actually stopping to think. So, what good conversations did you have? What did you learn? What did you achieve? What new clients have you brought in? Whatever it is, think about what's gone well and feel good about that. Secondly, are there any kind of comments or discussions that led to things that you think you wanted to spend a bit more time thinking about? So just allow thoughts to come and go and see whether there are any thoughts there that come floating back. You think, oh yeah, I need to think a bit about that. Or she said that. What do I think about that? So allow yourself a bit of time to mull over that. And finally, create a list of jobs for the next day. Well, actually, create a list of outstanding jobs and allocate them. So there may be many that go for the next day, but you may say, well, I'm going to allocate this one to tomorrow, where I'm going to block out 2 hours, or this one to next week, where I've got a gap, so I'm going to block out 2 hours because that's a tough job. I need time to really give to that. So it's really just, and then once you've done all that, that is the end. That is your day over. That's when you leave. You put your computer away, you leave your office, and you go and you get on with your afternoon and evening, or late afternoon, evening. Thoughts of work probably will come to mind because that's natural. As we said before, don't just let them well. So if something comes to mind, you think, oh gosh, I forgot to think about that. Yeah, go and either make a note or email yourself. I've had quite a few clients find emailing themselves works, and then they can let it go. Have pen and paper by your bed. So if a thought comes to mind when you're trying to drop off to sleep, you can write it down and deal with it the next day. So what I'm saying is you need to preserve that downtime and don't let work encroach. And if you're starting to mull, then remember what I talked about, the catchphrase, the mindful exercises, distractions, things like that. Don't allow those work birds to make nests in your hair.
That's fantastic. And I can feel some of the audience, when I think about this, the first thing that comes into my mind is half an hour. That's quite a long time. But start with 10 minutes, start with 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's starting that habit, and it's something I'm not great at myself, but you've got to start somewhere, and then you'll feel the benefit of it, and then you can build up and do a more thorough debrief once you've got into the habit of it.
Because when I was training to be a GP, they talked. Roger Neighbour was the big guy then, and one of the things he talked about was housekeeping, and this is what we were taught to do. So we were taught that we have to tidy up one patient before we start seeing another, otherwise we're never going to give the next one our full attention. So you have to, write up your notes, think about your plan, think about anything else that needs doing, make little notes of things you need to do, and then you're ready for the next patient, and you're fully present for them. So it's effectively like that's what you're doing. You're doing your housekeeping at the end. You're doing your dusting and your hoovering at the end of your working day, metaphorically.
Cleaning up our brains.
As you say, yes, it's good to start small. If it feels too much, half an hour, then start small.
Exactly. So I want to make sure we've got time for questions at the end, but really important question from your perspective as a GP, what can employers do to support their people and reduce stress at work?
Yeah, well, I think there's different stages here. So first of all, I think the culture of the business is really important. And firstly, I think we need to address the very well-known work-related stressors. Now, sorry, I just need to blow my nose. This isn't because I'm stressed, it's just for better. So we know that common workplace stressors are excessive demands, a lack of a clear role or job description, lack of information and support, lack of autonomy and relationship issues. They're the really common work-related stressors. So as a company, I think if you address those head on, then they're less likely to become an issue as you go along. So make sure people do have autonomy, a clear role, that there is information and support available, and that you're not making excessive demands upon people. And if relationship issues are becoming an issue, they need to be tackled straight away, not just ignored, because they will fester and get worse. And the other thing is to try to create a culture where people do feel they belong, especially if they're working from home. You have to work a bit harder to maybe have social events or meetings in the morning where people are all on together with a cup of tea, where managers maybe have to meet more often one-to-one to check in on their members. But try and find ways to help people feel that they belong, that they're appreciated, and that it's a safe place. And therefore, if they are struggling, they know they can go and talk to somebody without feeling fear of judgment. So that's fundamental, I think. Secondly, I think education is really important, because stress may not be resulting from the workplace. Members of staff may have things going on at home, which then affect their ability to sleep, which then, as we all know, when you're stressed, you're not functioning well up here. So they can't help but bring the impact to work. And then you as an employer or a manager lose out. So educating people, and this is where my webinars and workshops can be helpful. They're based on my stress self-check-in tool, and they provide an opportunity for people to learn a bit about some of the things I've talked about today, to learn about themselves, and to learn tools so that they can manage their own lives in a healthier way and manage their stress at home in a healthier way. And thirdly, it's the support, which again I've alluded to. But if you've got a member of staff who's struggling, actually paying for a few sessions of one-to-one support with somebody like myself or another organisation will nip things in the bud and equip them and minimize the impact on the workplace as well as on the individual's life and health. So It's hard because I know a lot of businesses are very pushed financially, and it's sometimes hard to demonstrate the benefits of investing. Deloitte did bring some figures out earlier this year, and they made the comment that, or they observed that for every pound spent on mental health initiatives, companies would see a saving of almost £5 on reduced absenteeism and increased productivity. And that's just mental health. So that hasn't even taken into account the recognition of the impact on physical health and what can be done. So it is worth investing. And I will just keep shouting this from the rooftops because I see the impact of stress on businesses and on individuals. And I know we can avoid it if we do the necessary. So I hope that helps.
Absolutely. And I think, you can literally change somebody's life because it is a
Yeah.
learning journey. And if they can get the tools in place that they can then take through the rest of their life, then that's just fantastic. So it's not just immediate investment for the
No.
workplace at that time, isn't it? Yeah.
And ultimately, if someone's battling with stress, then you're not going to get any of their strengths. They're in survival mode. Whereas if you can get them that support, and then you'll start getting their creativity and seeing them showing initiative and all the things that you want in a thriving workplace. So yeah, it's just so worth the investment.
Yeah. Well, my goodness, you've given us a lot there. So we've got 9 minutes, which is time for some questions. So I'm just going to pop up my slides again. So we normally ask for feedback at this stage as well, because that's really important for all our guest speakers as well. So we have a QR code, which I'm going to pop that on the screen, and I can just take one. Bear with me a second. This is possibly the bit that I struggle with most, as any regular attendee will know now. Here we go. And then okay, I'm looking for a thumbs up from one of the team to say that's right. Excellent. So we've got this feedback code. So we've got Louise on the chat box at the moment. So if you can take a moment, go on to the feedback QR code, please. And if you've got questions, now's the time to get them in. Louise, do you have any questions already that we can cover while people are doing the feedback?
Yes, I've had two questions that came in towards the start of the session, so I'll go through them. We had Sharon who asked, or who said, sorry, our struggle may be that we can see the signs of see the signs creeping in, but the person insists that they're okay and they don't need any help. What might you suggest there?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, isn't it? That is a tricky one. You maybe have to be less direct. So right, because some people feel embarrassed if someone's saying to you, look, you're looking stressed, how can we help? They feel embarrassed because they think they're hiding it. So I suppose it's just to arrange a meeting that isn't on the understanding that you're concerned, but it's just in a meeting where you can ask general open questions about how things and how you're finding this and how's home, and just give them the space to open up in a less direct way. But I appreciate it's very hard. And yeah, that's the only thing I can really think of.
Yeah, I
Is to
think
try and be a little bit, sorry?
I would say is what we were talking about, going for a cuppa. That's
Yeah.
that safe environment.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
some
So it's
people
not
are very
formal, it's relaxed, and it's actually just a person to person, human to human chat rather than a manager to an employee, because someone may feel ashamed. They may think, oh gosh, if I admit I'm stressed, what's going to happen? And that there may be a fear component that makes them just say, I'm fine, I don't need help. And even to say, just so you're aware, we do have this service, or so just make it I always use this ridiculous quote in different scenarios, but I think it's relevant. In My Big Fat Greek Wedding, I don't know if you know the film. There's a scene. It's a family business and a very domineering Greek father. And the daughter, wants to do something different, and she's saying to her mum, "But Papa won't let me." And the woman says, "Your father may be the head of the family, but I'm the neck," and the neck tells the head which way to turn. So what they do is they put all this information out there to the father, and then eventually he goes, "I know." And he comes up with the idea, which has actually been primed to do. So sometimes it's being a little bit more indirect. It's sowing seeds. It's sowing seeds that are important. So fundamentally, someone needs to know that it's okay to say that they are struggling. That seed needs to be sown within the culture. They need to know that you're approachable, that you're not judgmental, that you're there to help. And by sowing those seeds, that might help. But I actually had a client who cancelled at short notice one of her sessions with me. And I know she has periods of not being okay. So I emailed and said, you haven't got back in touch and it's been longer than normal. So are you okay? How are you? And she said, I'm not okay, but I'll get in touch when I am. And then I wrote and I said, just to reassure you, I take you as I find you. I will not think any less of you if you're struggling, if you're emotional and not your usual self. And it can really help to talk when you're not okay. And she immediately made an appointment for the next day. So she was obviously worrying about what I would think of her when she was tearful and not her usual self. So again, it's sowing these seeds that then will hopefully mean that someone can feel able to admit they're struggling.
Thank you. And we did have a couple of people in the chat making some similar suggestions, so asking twice, word the question differently, and trying to help people to open up. And then we had another question from Shan, who says, it feels a little stigmatizing to notice the physical signs and tells in an individual of stress. So how do we recognize stressful management or workplace situations creeping into the team before it becomes a stress diagnosis on one individual?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't. It's in different businesses. I don't know how tuned in you are to the hours that people are working or to the. But I suppose it's about trying to recognize demeanor amongst the team. Are people getting a bit more hot-headed with each other? Is there less of a sense of team? I think it probably is just generally looking for the signs, but in the team of people rather than in one person, and treating everybody the same. So if you're noticing that one person's looking stressed, again, have that one-to-one. If they say, well, actually, our team is under massive pressure, then it's a case of, well, let's have a word with the team then. So it's again, it's people feeling that stress is something to be ashamed of. It's just so not. And also one person may be feeling more stressed because they may have other stuff going on. So the heat in their kettle may be higher than it might be in other people's. So it may be the same workload, one person struggling more because of other stuff that's going on. So it's so important to make it clear that stress is not something to be ashamed of. It's very individual. People's experiences are different depending on their personalities, on what else is going on. But I think it's also about cohesiveness in a team and trying to treat the team en masse rather than focusing in on one person. If you get the feeling that there's stress in that team, then explore it as a team. So maybe people have other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would add there, think about how you connect as a team. So, we've got so many different setups for work nowadays with the hybrid working, home working. And how do you have team conversations? So there might be some structured meetings, but is that it? Is then everything else by email? How much conversation and connection is there within your team to allow for these opportunities to pick up on behavior and demeanor? So if you zoom in, you've got a very structured, regular weekly team meeting, and then you zoom off at the end of it. Have you allowed time to actually pick up on behaviours and demeanour? Do you ever see people face to face if you all work from home? Or if you are hybrid, but people are on different shifts, for example. So thinking about how you connect as a team is really important.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That is so important. And again, people can put on their happy face for an hour's meeting, but if you're missing out on those spontaneous one-to-one chats that you would have in an office, then the well-being can become a real issue. And I remember doing a webinar once when they said, the trouble is with our work, the team are all under pressure at the same time. So how do you stop the stress feeding off each other? And that's where I just thought, well, yes, actually, even just having a coffee and a chat with your mugs on the screen in the morning, which is just a chat, it's not about work, because some people in the team might struggle with something that someone else can help them with. So again, they can have an opportunity to ask at that point. So it's social, it's not time restricted to work. And then, as you say, just finding other opportunities to connect, and also remembering the not responding to an email with a het up aggressive email, because if someone else is stressed, so don't take the pause and come back and try and break that cycle of people messaging each other. Because again, you know, how we read an email is dependent on how we're feeling. If we're feeling low in confidence and a bit rubbish about ourselves, and we get an email that's just meant, it's just a standard email, it might hurt when it wouldn't on another time. So emails can be quite dangerous. So you're right, Rona. I think human connection is vital.
Okay, Louise, have we got any more? Because that's what is on 1 o'clock.
No, I've got lots of really lovely feedback. Lots of people found this really insightful. They've picked up hints and tips here, so thank you so much for that. But no other specific questions at this time.
Okay, well, all that it leaves is to say thanks once again, Dr. Rebecca. It's just been fantastic. We have obviously got the recording because there was so much in it. I think people will want to go back and listen again. So please feel free to go onto YouTube once we've done that. And we'll also send out some information after the webinar as well. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah, well, thank you all for coming. It's been lovely. Wishing you all the best.
And we'll end the recording and the webinar there. Thank you.
Okay.